In the golden halls of Topkapi Palace, where the power of the Ottoman Empire reached its dazzling peak, a woman of humble beginnings rose above sultans, viziers, and generals. Her name was Hurrem Sultan, but to those who feared her, she was simply the Russian. What few realize is that her climb to ultimate power was marked by a massacre so brutal it rewrote the rules of survival inside the palace. It is the year 1534. Sultan Suleiman, known to history as the Magnificent, rules over an empire that stretches from the Balkans to the shores of Africa. In the beating heart of Istanbul, within the impenetrable walls of the harem, Hurrem has achieved the impossible. She has become the Sultan's only legal wife, shattering centuries of tradition. But victory never comes without enemies, and Hurrem's triumph has awakened forces in the palace that now plot to destroy her. The first warning arrived one October night. Kilnihal, one of the harem's oldest concubines, was found dead in her chambers. Her body bore clear signs of poisoning, but what chilled everyone's blood was the message carved into her mirror: "The foreigner will pay." Hurrem understood immediately. This was no accident. After years of carefully consolidating her power, her enemies had chosen to strike. Behind the conspiracy was Mahmud Pasha, a vizier from the old guard, a man who had served under 3 different sultans. To him, Hurrem's rise represented nothing but corruption. A slave girl, a Christian from the distant lands of Ruthenia, had no right to shape the destiny of the empire. Mahmud began weaving a web of conspirators, disloyal eunuchs from the harem, discontented janissary guards, and nobles who saw in Hurrem a threat to their privileges. The plan came together during the celebrations of Bayram. While Suleiman was away on campaign in Persia, the conspirators prepared their move. Their scheme was simple and cruel: poison Hurrem during the ceremonial banquet, then blame her rivals among the concubines. The resulting bloodbath would allow Mahmud to seize control of the harem, and by extension, sway the imperial succession. But Hurrem Sultan had not come this far by being naive. Life in the palace had taught her a simple truth: survival depended not on strength, but on information. Her most trusted ally, Sumbul Aga, the chief eunuch of the harem, had infiltrated her enemy's ranks with spies. 3 days before the banquet, Hurrem knew every detail of the plot designed to end her life. Her response was as precise as it was merciless. She would not run. She would not hide behind the absent sultan's protection. Instead, she would turn their trap into her weapon. What followed would be remembered as the Night of the Golden Daggers. The first to fall was Mahmud himself. On the morning of November 15th, he received an urgent message summoning him to the palace gardens. The note, supposedly from a co-conspirator, promised crucial news. But when Mahmud arrived, it wasn't his ally waiting for him. 3 janissaries, loyal to Hurrem, stepped out of the shadows. They said nothing. Their daggers, crafted from pure gold, sank silently into Mahmud's body as dawn's first light broke over the marble fountains. The second blow fell upon the traitorous eunuchs of the harem. Hurrem had uncovered 4 who had accepted bribes to aid in her poisoning. During the noon prayer, while the men gathered in the private mosque, the doors were sealed from the outside. One by one, the eunuchs were strangled with silk cords, their bodies arranged in a pattern that carried a message no one could mistake. Treachery has a price. But the most terrifying punishment was reserved for the women, 6 concubines who had agreed to betray her, tempted by promises of power. Hurrem's revenge would be equal parts justice and terror. On the very night her enemies had chosen for her death, Hurrem hosted her own banquet. She invited the 6 conspirators to her private chambers, promising secrets that would raise them above every rival in the harem. The women, intoxicated by ambition, accepted without hesitation. The feast was a vision of imperial luxury: roasted lamb seasoned with spices from Damascus, honey and pistachio sweets, and wines from the finest Anatolian vineyards. The concubines ate eagerly, unaware that each bite was sealing their fate. At the head of the table, Hurrem watched with a smile that froze the blood of those who knew her true nature. When the palace bells marked midnight, Hurrem rose to her feet. The 6 women, already dizzy from food and wine, barely noticed the shift in her expression. She walked slowly to the windows, where the full moon cast its reflection across the Bosphorus, silver, stained with the hue of blood. "My dear sisters," she began softly, her tone almost maternal. "Tonight, we celebrate something very special. Tonight, we honor loyalty." The women exchanged uneasy glances. Some felt their limbs grow heavy but blamed the wine. "Do you know what separates a sultana from a simple concubine?" Hurrem continued, turning back toward them. "It is not beauty. You are all beautiful. It is not intelligence. The harem is filled with clever women. No, it is the ability to see your enemies before they see you." The youngest, Fatma, tried to rise, but her legs betrayed her. Terror spread across her face as she realized something was terribly wrong. "Sultana," she whispered, "I feel strange." Hurrem's smile sharpened. "Of course you do, my sweet Fatma. The venom of the Anatolian serpent works slowly. It paralyzes the body but leaves the mind awake. I wanted you all to be fully conscious of what comes next." Panic spread like wildfire. The women tried to scream, but only faint, strangled sounds escaped their throats. Their bodies, once so eager to betray, now betrayed them instead, trapping them in helpless silence. "Did you truly believe you could conspire against me and walk away unharmed?" Hurrem asked, gliding between their chairs like a predator circling its prey. "Did you think a woman from the wild steppes of Russia would be easy prey for your schemes? In my homeland, only the cunning survived the winter. The doors opened. Sumbul Aga entered, followed by 3 women draped in black. They were the Kizlar Agassi, Hurrem's personal executioners, trained in arts whispered about but never openly named. Their faces were veiled, but their eyes gleamed with merciless purpose. Hurrem stopped before Layla, a green-eyed beauty who had been one of the plot's fiercest voices. "Each of you accepted 30 coins of gold from Mahmud Pasha," she said. 30 coins to betray the one who gave you shelter, protection, and a life far better than the misery of your birthplaces." Tears streamed down the concubine's cheeks, but they could neither speak nor move. "Mahmud Pasha has already paid his price," Hurrem announced coldly. "His body was thrown into the Bosphorus this very morning. The eunuchs who aided him now lie dead in the mosque. But you, my darlings, your fate will be different. Your deaths will serve as a lesson for generations." She watched as the black-clad women moved with the ritual precision of priests. The first silk was unfurled and began to wrap Fatma's still warm limbs. The cloth smelled faintly of jasmine and the sea, scents meant to calm, to disguise what was happening. Fatma's lashes fluttered, her wide eyes locked on Hurrem. She could see, hear, remember every humiliation, every whisper she had traded for 30 coins of gold. Hurrem leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to the girl's brow, the way a mother might before a long sleep. "Remember," she whispered, so softly that the words were a benediction and a verdict both. "Remember why you chose the dark." The silk covered the mouth. The silk covered the nose. Breath shortened, then came in small, anxious pulls. Time stretched. An hour felt like an era as each woman lay conscious and unresisting beneath the tight, ceremonial shroud. The Kislar Agassi worked with the cold courtesy of butchers who know precisely where to make the cut. They wrapped, they tied, they waited. Each small sound, a muffled sob, a last gasp, was a punctuation in the room scented with spices and terror. When the last breath left Layla's body, Hurrem nodded once. The executioners stood, their faces still veiled, eyes unreadable. The silk bundles were carried out like unremarkable parcels. Outside the palace, moonlight silvered the Bosphorus. Inside, silk and shadow moved toward the private gate that opened on the water. "Let them go to sea," Hurrem ordered. "Let the currents and the fish keep their secrets." By morning, official reports would say the 6 concubines had been reassigned to a provincial harem. A more honest record would note the 6 dark shapes that drifted beneath the Black Sea's indifferent waves. Either way, the message was clear. Betrayal here was an act you paid for with blood and silence. The palace awoke to a silence that felt like a held breath. The marble corridors seemed to bend inward, as if listening. The remaining women of the harem moved through the halls with soft, cautious steps. Anyone who had doubted Hurrem before now kept their eyes pointed down. Rumors are a quick currency inside a court, but fear is a harder coin to counterfeit. Hurrem returned to her daily rituals, to the same embroidery, the same readings of state petitions, the same moments of laughter with the Sultan's favored attendants. She wore normalcy like armor, but there was a new edge in her gait, a small brightness in her eyes that spoke of a woman who had tasted total power and found it intoxicating. News from the outer world came at once. Reports of Venetian raids in the Mediterranean, passengers and ports attacked. Hurrem used those reports as she used everything, shaped, polished, set to serve her design. She summoned Ibrahim Pasha, the Grand Vizier who had stayed in Istanbul while Suleiman campaigned. Ibrahim was a man of prudence, his face a map of battles both won and survived. He greeted Hurrem with the reserved courtesy expected of a vizier to a high-ranking consort, but she did not wait for ceremony. "My Lord Ibrahim," she said, stepping into the dim hush of his private chambers, "I must bring to your attention a conspiracy that threatened the very core of this state." She spoke slowly, laying forth a narrative crafted with the care of a jeweler cutting a diamond. Mahmud Pasha had conspired with Venetian agents to overthrow the palace, she said. Mahmud had sold secrets and planned to murder members of the royal family and hand the keys of the empire to foreign hands. She produced documents, letters forged with the help of the palace's finest scribes that bore Mahmud's seal. She displayed payments traced to Venetian coffers, maps drawn with such crude fidelity one would swear they were lifted from the imperial archives. Ibrahim's brow furrowed. He was an experienced man and not easily fooled, but he was also a man who feared the chaos of intrigue. The documents smelled of ink and sleights of hand, but their weight felt convincing in his hands. Hurrem told her story with such insistence that Ibrahim began to see it not as fiction, but as a plausible unfolding of events. Exactly the sort of threat that justified decisive, unsentimental action. "You acted as any guardian of the realm must," Ibrahim said at last, voice low and steady. "You acted to preserve the Sultan's house." He folded the papers and regarded her with a respect that felt like armor. "We shall present this to the Sultan as proof of your loyalty." It was not enough to win Ibrahim's ear. Power required allies. Over the following days, Hurrem methodically met with naval commanders, provincial governors, and military chiefs. To each, she revealed a portion of her evidence tailored to sting their specific anxieties. Naval charts to the admiral, troop movements to the commanders, lists of corrupt officials to the governors. She seeded fear that mirrored their own private suspicions until they were ready not only to believe her, but to defend her story. When Suleiman returned in early December, triumphant, banners aloft, the city thrumming with the noise of celebration, he stepped back into a palace in which every senior advisor had already been quietly briefed. Poems and public accounts had already begun to appear, praising a woman who had saved the realm from treachery. The narrative had firm roots before he read the papers, a loyal wife who had protected home and throne. Hurrem waited 3 days, allowing the official reports and the chorus of praise to set like mortar. When she finally requested a private audience, she took on the role she had rehearsed 1,000 times. The grieving, dutiful wife who had borne the weight of worry while her husband fought beyond the land's edge. She knelt at his feet, a gesture of humility so practiced it disguised the calculation in her heart. "My Sultan," she said, letting her voice break in the place she knew would pierce him. "I failed in my duty to keep your home untouched." The palace was stained with plots. Suleiman lifted her gently. He had a fondness for the way she combined vulnerability and steel, a mix that both softened and steadied him. "You protected the heart of my house," he murmured. "The reports say you acted with courage." She let the silence hang and then filled it with a quiet confession. How she had discovered the plot, how she had prevented worse, how Mahmud Pasha and his accomplices had paid the debt owed to treason. Her performance was flawless. She let grief rim her eyes like a costume and let resolve steady her voice like a blade. Suleiman embraced her, not merely as a man in love, but as a sovereign grateful to one who had guarded his throne. In the weeks that followed, the story hardened into history. Courtiers wrote encomiums. Poets crafted verses that praised her loyalty. Chroniclers, those architects of time, recorded the massacre as a necessary purge. The empire's officials echoed the same line. Hurrem had saved the state. No one asked too closely about the silk shrouds or the exact fate of Mahmud's body. To question was to court suspicion. And so, in the hush of the palace nights, while the Bosphorus sighed against its stone, the harem resumed its rituals. The price of safety had been paid. Hurrem sat a little higher at the Sultan's side. Her enemies were gone. Her allies were in place. The game had been won, brutally, utterly, and forever. From that moment, the story ceased to be rumor. It became fact, echoed in every court and written in every chronicle. Hurrem Sultan was not just the Sultan's consort. She was a guardian of the empire itself. Her name was spoken with reverence. Poets filled their verses with her bravery. Officials owed their safety to her vigilance. Even the mosque prayers began to include her alongside the Sultan, a sign of honor reserved for no other woman. Behind the curtain, the truth was drowned beneath the weight of her legend. No one spoke of Mahmud's corpse carried by the Bosphorus current. No one asked what became of the 6 women last seen entering Hurrem's chambers. Their absence was buried beneath a tide of praise, and Hurrem's power, once fragile, became unshakable. At night, the palace grew still. Only the sigh of the Bosphorus wind moved through the marble halls. Some swore they heard whispers, the muffled cries of the concubines who had vanished. But Hurrem slept peacefully, untouched by ghosts. She had played the most dangerous game of all and won. She had turned betrayal into proof of loyalty, slaughter into legend. Her enemies were dead. Her allies were loyal. Her husband loved her more than ever. The cost had been steep, but to a woman who had risen from a slave market in the frozen lands of Ruthenia to the throne of the mightiest empire on earth, no cost was too high. Hurrem had transformed a bloody act of vengeance into a monument of political genius. She had proven that she was not merely the Sultan's beloved, she was the power behind the throne, a force that could not be ignored. And the empire itself had learned a lesson. In the Ottoman court, there was space for only one queen, one sultana, and she was Hurrem. From then on, every rival tread carefully, their ambitions silenced by fear of the silk cord, by memory of the women who had disappeared without a trace. Hurrem's story became a warning as much as a legend, an unspoken rule carved into the very bones of the palace. Power was hers, absolute, undisputed, eternal. The whispers of the dead might echo in the dark, but Hurrem's voice was the one that mattered. She had reshaped destiny, and she would never let it go. Thus ended the night of the Golden Daggers. What had begun as a conspiracy to erase her had instead secured her immortality. Hurrem Sultan, the slave who rose to command an empire. A woman who proved, in the most ruthless way possible, that in the Ottoman court, survival belonged only to the cunning. And that loyalty, when betrayed, was paid for not with tears, but with blood.